There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves that branch off of the spinal cord to either deliver motor information to structures in the peripheral nervous system or to deliver sensory information from the peripheral nervous system to the spinal cord. So in between two stacked vertebrae, there is a space or an opening called the intervertebral foramen, and the spinal nerves branch off of the spinal cord and they jut out through that intervertebral foramen. Now you may be familiar with the term of a bulging disc or a slipped disc. That refers to the structure right here. So this intervertebral disc here is a type of kind of semi-squishy cartilage, and sometimes it kind of slips out of place, or part of it kind of bulges out like a weak part of a balloon. And when that happens, it can put pressure on a spinal nerve, and it can be either very, very painful, or it can actually cut off sensation to an area of the body, and you could lose control of a certain part of your body depending on which spinal nerve is being compressed. So typically it's very painful, and they can go in and try to treat it to release that pressure. So if we take a look at a cross section of the spinal cord, so this is as if we chopped the spinal cord transversely, and the spinal cord would be here. Spinal nerves are these little segments out here, and the spinal nerves all contain some axons that are sensory going towards the spinal cord, and some that are motor that are going away from the spinal cord. Now, the spinal nerve itself is actually fairly short. As it gets closer to the spinal cord, it branches into two different areas. You have the ventral root, which is towards the anterior or the front of the spinal cord, and the dorsal root, which is towards the posterior or dorsal part of the spinal cord. And you can see in the little drawing here that they drew the motor axons or the motor neurons in red and the sensory ones in blue. So the roots themselves only have either sensory or motor. So the ventral root only has motor neurons going out to the peripheral nervous system. The dorsal or posterior root has sensory neurons coming to the spinal cord. And then at the spinal nerve, they branch and then go to different areas. Now, the spinal nerves actually branch into structures called plexuses. And what happens is the axons in the spinal nerves rearrange, and they kind of branch and come back together. And there are 4 major plexuses that exist, and you should recognize these terms from our very first lesson of the semester. So the cervical plexus is found in the neck, which is where you find your cervical vertebrae, and that's the cervical region of the body. The brachial plexus are the nerves that go to the arm, and the arm is the brachial region of the body. The lumbar plexus is the lumbar region of the body, where your lumbar vertebrae are, and it's the lower back region. And the sacral plexus is down here at the sacrum. Now, each of these plexuses branch into nerves that go to specific structures. So, for example, the cervical plexus up here in the neck, it branches into the phrenic nerve, and the phrenic nerve actually goes all the way down to the diaphragm, and it stimulates the diaphragm to contract, and it's involved in breathing. And when you get hiccups, what's happening is that the phrenic nerve is causing the diaphragm to spasm. It also branches into nerves that go into the posterior head and trunk region. The brachial plexus goes towards the arms, and it breaks into the axillary nerve. If you remember, the axillary region is the armpit region. The radial nerve, which goes along the radius of the lower arm, and the ulnar nerve, which runs along the ulna. The lumbar plexus branches into the femoral nerve, which the femoral region is where the femur is, so that's the thigh region. And then another nerve called the saphenous nerve that goes down to the pelvis and legs as well. And then the sacral plexus branches into or turns into the sciatic nerve, which branches into the tibial nerve and the fibular nerve. So these go to the lower limb or to the leg. You may have heard someone say that their sciatica is acting up. Sometimes the sciatic nerve can become inflamed or pinched by maybe a muscle or something like that. And when that happens, it can cause pain and numbness in the buttocks that kind of radiates down into the leg. Now, if you remember, the costal area has to do with the thoracic area, has to do with the chest. So remember, the costal cartilages connected the ribs to the sternum. So the intercostal nerves arise from the nerves in the thoracic area, and it extends to the intercostal muscles and other areas around the ribs. So the intercostal nerves also help with breathing by stimulating the internal intercostal muscles and the external intercostal muscles to contract to help you inhale and exhale.